Hey everybody, this is Larry. I wanted to reach out to you again and just give you a little bit of encouragement as things continue to develop. Years ago, I read a scripture in the Bible from Proverbs chapter 30. I believe it was verse 28. It was an interesting verse because it talked about how a lizard was able to get into the palace of the king. What could that possibly have meant? And so I preached a sermon on it and I learned a lot about that verse. Interesting thing is that King Solomon probably was just sitting in his bedchambers or walking around his palace, and he spotted a little bitty lizard. And he thought to himself, I have armed guards everywhere, outside the palace, in the palace, everywhere, to protect me from anybody who might try to hurt me. And yet, here's a little bitty lizard that can just slip in. They tell me the little Geico lizard can curl up as small as a dime and obviously can get in anywhere. And so I want to take that little scripture and apply it to the situation you and I find ourselves in today. We live in a world where people are talking about populating Mars, having a community on Mars. There's talk about the possibility of the reality that in the next several years there'll be flying cars that move about. Now, I don't know if any of that stuff will happen or not. There's a lot of indication that it can. But here we are, living in a world where we talk about those kinds of things, but the reality is that a little small virus, the virus that is confronting us right now is about 1/1000th the size of a yardstick. It is so incredibly small. It looks like a soccer ball with little spikes sticking out of it. And yet that virus, as small as it is so dangerous that it has already taken the lives of so many countless numbers of people, and they say it's escalating every day, and yet it's so small that it literally can stop the world, and it has. I just went to the grocery store to pick up lunch, and I saw things that I never thought I would see. People literally walking around with face masks on, looking away, not making eye contact. It's an incredible thing to observe and to see. I hear people saying that God did it to judge certain people. Don't ever fall into that trap. Nobody can explain why things happen the way they do. We don't know. We're human beings. But I can tell you what I've observed, and I bet you have too, and that is that this virus and this pandemic that's going on has really called out the best in most people. You see people rallying around to help. You see people who were not open maybe to the gospel or weren't thinking about God or spiritual things. They are now. And while I certainly don't believe that God caused any of this, God allowed it to happen. We don't know why. Deuteronomy 29:29 tells us there's certain things we just never will know. But I do know this, that God will be able to use this in the lives of anyone and everyone who will allow him to do that. So just like that little bitty lizard who was able to make its way into the king's palace, get past all the armed guards and find its way in, that's really what faith can do too. As big a problem as this is, and as well armed as we think we are, your faith and mine is as strong as anybody else's faith. And I, for one, am choosing to believe, regardless of what happens, that God's still in control, God's thinking about us, and God's going to use this in ways we could never possibly imagine, in ways we've not even thought about. So stay safe, stay protected, know we're thinking about you. I'm sitting here in the Compassion Care office at the church, and I just wanted to reach out to you today.